Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my great pleasure for the next instalment of the Quantum Leap Business Show, going around the world to give inspiration, ideas and insights in how some of the leaders of business fields around the world get on in business. And it's indeed my pleasure today to have the International President and CEO of the International Reciprocal Trade Association, Mr. Ron Whitney. Ron, welcome to the show.
John, thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
So Ron, just for the benefit of everybody out there, you're in the US?
Irvington, Virginia, which is close to Richmond, the capital.
Okay, so that's on the east coast of the US.
Mm-hmm.
Ron, we've known each other now for, well, must be 20 or 30 years just about. You took over as the president of the International Reciprocal Trade Association, must have been 14 years ago. What's been the highlights of the term so far?
Well, I'm really proud of the work that Patty and I have done in the last 14 years, and the board as well, and all of our members. Most importantly, we've really elevated the advocacy role of IRTA. I mean, we've stepped in and created tons of advisory memos, jumped in on every controversial issue that comes up, tripled the membership in IRTA and UC, more than doubled the revenues, revised the ethics code, created a new certified trade executive educational certification, put both the CTE and the CTB online, which is really neat. And I continue to still help dozens of exchanges every year with a particular US problem of non-matching TINs with the IRS. It's kind of detailed, but basically the IRS fines barter exchanges if they don't report the federal ID numbers properly, and those can be really extensive fines. And IRTA has a 100% abatement success rate in terms of getting those penalties removed. So we do a lot. We're very busy. There's only two of us in IRTA, Patty and myself, but we get a heck of a lot of work done.
Yep. And for those that are not that familiar with the International Reciprocal Trade Association, just explain what functionality that how do exchanges and how do individual customers of exchanges participate through UC or universal currency? Sure.
There's actually two major entities involved with IRTA. IRTA, of course, being the first one that was formed in 1979, and it's the 501c6 business association, nonprofit trade association for the industry. But we have a wholly owned subsidiary called Universal Currency, which is really a trade exchange for trade exchanges. So all the members of IRTA participate in UC, and they're allowed to trade amongst themselves with our own private UC currency that's been around since 1997. So we're doing about 1.4 million a month in UC, which is very impressive. That's about 5 times what it did 14 years ago. So it allows exchanges to trade goods and services outside of their current geographic zone, which is a beautiful thing. So the trade exchange in Philadelphia can send their member to Los Angeles or London or what have you, and it's all put together through UC.
Yep. So, and the short benefit, if anybody listening here that's part of BBX, BBX is a member of the Universal Currency. I think there's, what is there, at 80, 100, 120 exchanges like BBX as part of the group. So if you owned a hotel here in London and you sold a spare room and obtained some BBX money, you can turn it into a widget off an exchange that you can buy in Seattle or in Rio de Janeiro or wherever else someone operates.
And the other huge benefit of UC that I constantly tell our exchange owners is the sales value of it. When you're in front of a prospect to sign up for your particular exchange, obviously they're interested in your local goods and services. But hey, are they traveling to the United States next year? Can you send them to Bermuda? All those things are really valuable and make your own exchange more valuable.
Yep. And another point too that I've been seeing over the recent decade or two is, traditionally the universal credit spend was probably largely in travel, and then secondly followed up by goods and services, and then thirdly online. But online is increasingly the opportunity where you don't have to pay import duty, you don't have to buy shippage, and with coronavirus, you don't have to go through vaccinations to travel. So what about the online offerings, Ron? Have you seen an increase or in online offerings conducted through universal currency?
Absolutely. And we're getting to see more products being moved as well. I mean, they have to be shippable, not expensive to ship. You don't want to send a antique mirror to London from Philadelphia, but the things that are easily shippable are moving more. It's just a fantastic thing. I mean, I go back to before, on the sales side, before I was head of IRTA, I used to take my laptop out to a sophisticated business prospect, like the manager of a radio station or, billboard company, because those kinds of people were really interested in buying outside of their zone. And oftentimes it was a huge closing tool to bring those members in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Ron, are there any other benefits why anybody, irrespective of what industry you're in, should be part of their industry voice piece?
Sure. Well, I mean, regardless of what industry you're in, if you love your industry and you care about your industry, your first responsibility is to be informed about what's going on in your industry. So IRTA is on top of all of those critical issues that are going on all the time. If you're serious about improving your company and growing your company, you want to improve the level of customer service that you're providing to your customers. You have a responsibility to educate yourself and be top of your game in your industry. So we provide the certifications to do that, the advisory memos to continue to learn. And the other thing is, look, no matter how you cut it, our industry is still a relationship-based industry. Regardless of how fancy the technology or the software gets, the more people you know in this business and the more relationships you have that are real are going to grow your company and improve, again, the services and products that you're able to give to your members, offer your members.
Yep. Ron, what would you say to the people out there? I know there's a few, and I've been a part of IRTA since, I think, 1989. I went to my first meeting in Los Angeles, and I can't remember whether 1990, 91, something like that. And there was always a thing, because of what we do, that a lot of people viewed whatever they did as proprietary, and whether it's in part of a trade exchange or whether it's in a tire servicing business or whether it's running a hotel. Largely we all face the same problems, we all face the same issues, we all have the same opportunities. And I found over the years that by associating with people in similar fields, with similar mindsets, with similar goals, I got a lot more benefit out of by giving some of the information that I had, because I ended up getting back a lot of information that I didn't know, rather than being in a competitive situation. Can you share some thoughts on that?
Well, you have the right attitude, and I wish more people had that attitude, frankly. Some are a bit, shall we say, selfish about keeping their methodologies to themselves and not wanting to share it. I'll give you a quick example. There's a sales pro on the East Coast that's been in the business for 35 years. I've asked him to head up sales seminars at the conventions for 14 years. He won't do it because he doesn't want to give away his sales secrets to the industry.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge of any industry, but particularly an issue with us, because it's difficult, as you say, for people to separate their own self-interest with the interest of the industry. Now, if we all cooperated and did what you're doing and talking about, imagine how we could grow this industry. But people tend to be operating in their own fiefdoms, their own geographic region, and they put walls up and they don't cooperate to the level that they want to, or they've had a bad experience sometimes with another owner.
Yep.
And they never forget it.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So we need to get beyond that as an industry. I mean, it's a little petty. Let's move on, and especially in these days.
Yep.
with changes in regulations coming that could affect us, the whole crypto blockchain thing going on, the rise of the internet, the Travelocities of the world. We really need to bind together and pool our strength, our individual strengths, into one collective strength.
Yep, I agree 100%. Ron, before you were in the position you're in now, you had your own successful exchange for many years, I think 14 years or so. What got you into the business in the first place?
Well, my experience career-wise is in the law and insurance and some real estate. And I had a small marketing company, and I started to do one-on-one trades. I trade 5,000 of media for a $5,000 credit at a fine dining restaurant. I thought I was a hotshot. This was amazing. And then I learned about third-party trading and these things called trade exchanges. But I was very skeptical at the time back then. So I flew around the US and I met with the top owners and whatnot. And I was blown away by the sophistication of their businesses, blown away by the amount of money they were making, blown away by the fact that our industry in the US was legitimized by the 1982 TEFRA Act. And with a law background, that particularly impressed me back in 92, because TEFRA is only 10 years old. So anyway, I went back to the wife and said, I'm starting a new company. And she almost lost it. You know, I was pretty upset about that, but we got through it and wound up building one of the best barter exchanges on the East Coast.
Fantastic. And so, Ron, in your time owning that, what's the best deal or the most creative deal or something that stood out in your memory back from those days?
Well, you know, John, when people are asked this question, most people answer by talking about a big yacht or a fancy sports car that they did or whatever. But to me, the best deals are the ones where we really help our members grow their business or help them out of a bind. So there's two quick little stories I can show you that mean a lot to me. When 9/11 happened back in 2001, I had a printer that had about $40,000 positive in his account, and his daughter was getting married the weekend after 9/11. Well, of course, the airlines were all shut down. They were going to go forward with the wedding, but their honeymoon plans were canceled. Obviously, they're going to the Caribbean or whatever. So he called me and said, Ron, is there anything you can do to help me? I want to save my daughter's honeymoon. So we called our friends up, another exchange up in New England, in Connecticut. We found them a beachfront home in Cape Cod. We got a Philadelphia limousine service to drive them all the way up, which is 300 some miles, to Cape Cod and pick them up and bring them back. Anyway, the printer was just thrilled. It was picked up by the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper as a lead story. And it showed the power of barter to be able to come in and step in and help people. All right. The second story I always love to tell is when a woman came into my office who had a gift basket company. And we had windows in the office so I could see her drive in, and I saw smoke billowing out of her 1989 Chevy Impala. So I signed her up and everything. And I said, Gladys, I couldn't help but notice that when you drove in, it looks like your car needs a new muffler. And she says, oh yes, Mr. Whitney, I really need it, but I can't afford it. I said, wait a minute, Gladys, you sell gift baskets. I'm going to sell those like crazy. I have confidence we'll sell your gift baskets. So I'm going to give you $1,000 credit line. I picked up the phone. I called Art Chernikov, the muffler guy. I said, do you have a muffler for an '89 Chevy? He said, sure, send her over. So I said, Gladys, just go down 2 blocks, turn left. He'll do it right now. And it'll be like $260 in trade, and you don't pay any cash. She started crying in front of me.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Whitney, no one's ever done that. You sure I shouldn't pay you? No. That's the power of barter and the power of an extension of a credit line, right?
Yep.
It's a small example. You can put more zeros behind it and make it a $10,000 credit line or $100,000 credit line, but the concept is still the same. You gave that customer purchasing power that they didn't have before.
Yep. And not only is it a credit line, but it's interest free. And also the terms of the repayment are at when you have some spare capacity to repay. So, you know, just a lot of people wish all banks were like that if you consider us as a banking function.
Right. And she wound up being one of our top traders in the exchange.
Yep. And I think the message there is you look after people, doesn't matter what it is that you do, and they certainly remember it, even if it's only a small gesture like that in relative money terms.
Exactly. Yep.
Ron, you've been in the industry, as you say, 20, 30 years. And what do you think, other than the obvious, what's been the changes in doing business and over that period of time compared to what it was back in the day when I started, when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have mobile phones, we certainly didn't have apps. We wrote checks to one another.
You and I both started back in the days where we would record our trades in a ledger book with a number 2 pencil and type out our statements. I used to have my young daughters lick the envelopes and put the stamps on. So one of the key things, obviously, has been the increase in technology and the software, the relational database software that we have access to now is as sophisticated as any bank has. And of course, the advent of the internet helps with the communication and the brokering. It doesn't solve everything in terms of providing good customer service, but it really helps. I think we've found as an industry that you still need excellent brokers and human contact with our clients to make this work the best it can. The other change is internet related in that we talked a little bit about fiefdoms and geographic boundaries of each exchange's membership base. There's been an erosion of that to some extent because of the internet. So now exchanges, from what I see, are maybe 60 or 70% geographic locally based and 30 or 40% that are internet based. So take a graphic designer, for heaven's sakes. Your graphic designer can be anywhere in the world, and they'll just send you their design work. But you still got to walk down the street in London to get your hair cut. You can't do that in New York. So that's a double-edged sword. There's benefits to that, and that it increases each exchange's membership basis, but it also gets into the issue of people potentially accessing other exchanges' members that are already theirs because of the lack of geographic boundary.
Yep. Yeah, often people ask me, John, what's your biggest competitor? And I always say it's ignorance of what we do. Instead of worrying about the little piece of the pie that we are, let's make the pie bigger. But that's another story. So
that's a whole nother segment. That's a whole.
Absolutely. So Ron, our industry is no different to any other business. There's been some major upheavals over the past 10 or 20 years in business. Do you remember one road hump, the speed bump that came along that stood out in particular, and how did you overcome the difficulty created by that?
Well, I don't want to bore people again with the IRS non-matching TIN thing, but when I was in my 3rd year of business with my exchange, I received a notice from the IRS proposing a $60,000 penalty, which was probably at the time 2/3 of our revenue.
Yep.
So they literally could have put me and other exchanges out of business. So at the time, I went to another Barter association and said, "Gosh, we got to do something about this." And they said, "No, Ron, you need to." Don't kick the sleeping dog, stick your head in the sand and we'll get by. And I said, that's not the way to handle the problem. So I approached the IRS. I wound up getting on an IRS advisory board to try to work the problem from the inside out, which was very helpful. And now, I have a methodology, like I said before, that can solve that particular problem and get the abatements we need. But it's a serious problem in the US. And when exchange owners face it, they're aghast. I mean, they're frightened. It's dangerous. So,
yep. And again, the power of association. If you've got a few heads together, it becomes a less fearsome obstacle.
Yeah. And then a more recent issue is this issue of digital currency and crypto and blockchain. And a lot of exchanges have embraced that by trying to argue that barter was the first digital currency on the planet. And that's not particularly true, and it can cause all kinds of problems. In the US, we've had exchanges have their merchant service accounts shut down by banks because of it. We've had credit lines from banks shut down. So it's important to not actually present yourself as some other crypto or blockchain. That's, if you understand the definition of barter trade dollars versus cryptocurrency versus blockchain, you quickly realize we're not the same animal.
Yep.
Okay. We are an alternative currency that's acceptable and legal in most jurisdictions, but that doesn't mean we're a digital cryptocurrency. We don't have stored value like crypto. We're normally not, exchangeable for cash. These are important distinctions. So
yep.
we have a really good cryptocurrency committee that stays on top of these issues. And as you know, we've written a lot of advisory memos about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's important to understand that a trade exchange is a centralized exchange where the manager of the exchange can manage it because they know all the goings on, and a decentralized exchange on a blockchain, which is a cryptocurrency, is just one end, another end of the spectrum. It's all, and I wouldn't say it's alternative currency. I like using the term complementary because we don't recommend ditching your Uncle Sam dollars or your pound sterling.
Right.
But if you've got a pound sterling account or a US dollar account and you've got a trade account, then you've got the best of both worlds.
Exactly. Complementary is a great word. As you know, we actually have a foundation called the Complementary Economics Foundation. The issue of using the word barter or not is a fascinating discussion. You've heard the words mutual peer-to-peer credit clearing system. That is on point, but it's also quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I know because this industry started in America, like a lot of things, and back in the 50s, and it was always introduced to me as a barter system. And
right.
For those out there that are unfamiliar with that, you could also call that contra or swap or exchange or trade or any of the mechanisms. Swapping goods and services for goods and services at the same time for the same value is the strict definition of a barter. And yet that's not what we do. And that's why you guys call it barter, I call it trade, because we solve the problem of having to have what each other wants at the same time for the same value, don't we?
And the third party trading element of what we do is crucial. And it's amazing how some people have trouble understanding that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ron, you're a lawyer by background, and you got your degree still working full time. How important is education versus the cost of it these days? I've seen some pretty damning reports, particularly out of the US, with people having massive student loan accounts when they leave and the interest on them. And it's almost a bigger debt than credit card debt, which I was astounded by. Yeah. So what are your thoughts there?
I guess, first of all, it depends on the education you're talking about, what degree you're pursuing, and obviously the cost that's involved with that. I mean, let's use me as an example. For undergrad, I got a political science degree from George Washington University. That was an expensive degree that you couldn't do bloody anything with it, frankly. So I painted houses after college for a couple years. Yeah. Now, contrast that to a law degree, and I did take out student loans for my law degree. In my mind, the law degree was worth every penny. When you get a law degree, you kind of see the world different from a business perspective. It teaches you how to understand how your decisions today affect the future, helps you with contracts, relationships, you name it. So it really depends on the degree and the costs involved. I grant you, if you're going to go undergrad for 4 years to get a ceramics degree, is it really worth $150,000? Probably not.
Yep.
So, but you also, I think, brought up a point about, whether a degree, increases a person's business acumen or social skills. I always tell a story in law school. There was a joke where we said that the guys who got A's in law school would make perfect researchers in the library.
Yep.
But the guys who got gentlemen C's, those were the guys you wanted in court.
Yep.
Because they had the personal skills, right?
Yep.
So, sometimes an intellectual doesn't make the best personal communicator.
Yep. And I'm seeing that, I don't know about in the US, but here in the UK, the last couple of decades, increasingly so, people are coming out of higher education with, and I don't know if the internet and social media has got anything to do with it, but certainly a much lower appreciation of soft skills, skills of various kinds. Yeah. Plus, they've virtually got no business acumen behind them. What do you think us as business leaders and people in positions where we do encounter thousands and hundreds of thousands of businesses, what's our responsibility to try and improve that, if you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. In law school, they don't teach a course on business, how you run your law practice. They teach you what to do in court, but they don't teach you how to meet your payroll or deal with taxes, et cetera. So I think as business entrepreneurs and leaders in our various markets, it's incumbent upon us to try to get involved with the colleges and the universities to help create curriculum that can really present courses that can help students in the real world in terms of how to run a business. So it doesn't matter if you're an orthodontist, a dentist, a brain surgeon, if you got to have somebody who knows how to run the business.
Yep.
That's a great way to do it. It can take some time, but it's worth the effort.
Yep. Yeah. Ron, COVID is a big topic in the last couple of years, and you've run across some issues with that. What's the best example of someone dealing with COVID in a positive way, taking it by the scruff of the neck and giving it a good old rough up?
Well, in general, what I saw was that the really smart barter exchanges out there simply pivoted quickly and tried to focus on the businesses that weren't so much affected by COVID and grow those sectors of their exchange. The exchanges, obviously, that kind of sat on their hands and moped about the situation saw a decline in their trading. But others seized the opportunity. For instance, a lot of exchanges got very aggressive on the real estate side of things that otherwise was not so active with them. And that kind of filled the void.
Yep.
So, the smart, creative entrepreneurs did what good entrepreneurs do. They pivoted and moved forward with what they had.
Yep.
It worked. Were there exchanges that were down in revenue? Certainly. Were there ones that maintained status quo? Certainly. But yep. A good third or 40% saw an increase.
Yep. Well, in fact, Ron, you wrote recently that there's been an estimated 20% of increase in businesses adopting a trade exchange as a great tool during COVID. Where did you get those numbers from, and why is that?
Well, it was a general number. It's not set in stone, and it certainly wasn't universal to every exchange. But again, the aggressive, creative exchanges got out there and took advantage of the fact that there's more unused capacity out there. Yep. Whether it's a hotel, restaurant, or whatever, and got their sales teams focused on those businesses. And also there's an enormous amount of incoming inquiries to exchanges. I'm thinking of, I heard stories of, hotel conglomerates that own 50 or 100 hotels calling exchanges and say, I need you. Where pre-pandemic, they wouldn't answer our phone calls.
Yeah. And for those out there that, a trade exchange works on the spare capacity element of any business. And obviously, if you've got more capacity, it becomes higher up in the urgency list to do something about.
Exactly. And it helped turn the light bulb on in their head. We've been talking to them about unused capacity for 40 plus years. And then when they really experience the downturn, it's like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. So Ron, just getting back to cryptocurrencies, there's been recent announcements primarily out of the US with the SEC, with Ripple and in particular, and that looks like going the way of the cryptocurrency. Australia's just come out with the Australian Securities Commission now adopting strategy and formalising the arrangement with digital currencies. And Joe Biden's come out with their own digital. I see the Chinese are. So it seems to be a wave moving forward and away from physical notes and coins. What are your thoughts there?
Well, again, IRTA constantly is weighing and examining the status of this ever-changing industry to try to determine if there's an opportunity there for us. Is there a fit where you can interface existing trade dollar systems with an emerging technology like crypto or blockchain? And that's really open to debate still. And you also have to look at it from a gestation, mindset. Where are we in the growth and gestation of crypto and blockchain? On a scale of 10, are we at a 2? If we are, then when we get to a 5 or 6, perhaps there's where we see, the opportunity to do some sort of merging of the two.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, we're struggling with seeing that connection because you don't want to be in a position that you displace the existing trade dollar system, for heaven's sakes. You wanted to complement what we already have and help grow that.
Yep.
So that's the challenge. So we're watching all this regulatory activity very closely. We also hired a top-notch law firm in DC to help us with that. We got a fantastic lady who's head of her crypto department for a 550-person law firm in DC.
Okay.
On trade, John, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Wouldn't be anything else.
Right.
So, Ron, you must have, in your position, come across some interesting people over the years. Did anybody stand out as, wow, there's an interesting person, and why was that so?
Well, there are a few. The first one was a fellow named Dr. William S. Gaither, who was president of Drexel University back in the mid-'80s. And I wound up working for him, and he became my mentor back in those days. And he taught me a lot because from an administrative standpoint, he was a very creative, concept-oriented guy who threw up a lot of balls, a lot of opportunities. And what I saw in the university at the time was most people put their hands in their pockets and watch those balls drop on the floor. I was a young kid, 31 years old. I was running around trying to catch every ball I could. And so it taught me that problems are opportunities and you need to be aggressive and proactive and go after them. I mean, I had vice presidents of the university come to me back in those days and said, "Kid, slow down, you're working too hard. That's not how we do things."
Yep.
So consequently, it helped elevate me in the university, and it was a wonderful relationship. Another one was an IRTA member. Let's talk about Sky Auction and Michael Herring. I love entrepreneur stories. I don't know if I think I've told you this one before, where when Michael Herring was 23 years old, he was the guy that created the Farrah Fawcett poster in her bathing suit with the hair blown back. And this was like early 70s. He borrowed $40,000 from his uncle to print these things. He borrowed money to pay Farrah Fawcett for a 15-minute shoot, and he became a multimillionaire on the Farrah Fawcett posters. Yep. And retired when he was 24 years old.
Yep.
Went to the Caribbean, came back, was bored, and now runs all kinds of different media companies in the US. But that kind of chutzpah and guts, I admire so much. You know, Michael Herring is a great guy and very creative. So those are two guys that shape my thinking, and I appreciate, you know.
IRTA tried a hybrid meeting, not this year, but last year, which was hugely successful. For those people that don't understand that every year IRTA has a convention somewhere and everybody flies in from all over the place and meets for a few days and kicks ideas and introductions and connections about. And but during COVID, we had to go online. And so what's the future with the events in terms of either hybrids or online events compared to previously in situ ones?
Well, this year in 2021, in June, we were very optimistic that we could have an in-person convention in September. But then this Delta variant hit. So we had to cancel that. And the board's thinking is let's move it to the first 2 weeks of May of 2022. So that's what we're focused on. And we're just crossing our fingers that, you know, there won't be a third or fourth or fifth variant coming down the road, and we can do that.
Yep.
You know, the conventions are important. Our industry is relationship based. So it would be great to get everybody together again. Some of us have Zoom fatigue as well. So, you know, an in-person one has a lot of value.
Yep. I know I was speaking at a recent event at the International Franchise Show at Excel in London, and it was refreshing to be back on stage and in front of an audience rather than on Zoom. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Ron, what's next in the Ron Whitney life story that you can share with us?
I still consider myself a young man, and I do have 5.5 years left on my contract with IRTA. So I don't plan on going anywhere. I plan on being here for at least 5.5 years and hopefully more if the board will have me. And so I'll continue to grow IRTA and increase the awareness of all the benefits that Barter brings to business owners. And you know, talk about the power of organized barter as much as I can. It's a powerful business tool, as you know, that every business owner, virtually every business owner, should be involved in.
Yeah, I talk about it's the biggest hidden asset that every business owner has that most of them are blissfully unaware of.
Exactly.
Ron, it's been indeed my great pleasure. I know you're a busy man. It's been my great pleasure to have you on the show, and we really appreciate you making some time available and sharing some of those insights and thoughts and ideas with our audience. So Ron Whitney, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for the great work you do for our industry.